Join us and our friends as we fall down the rabbit hole of security wonder. If you're ready to see how deep it goes, you've found the right place. Pour your tea. You're not late for office hours. And now, our Red Queen, Tara Wheeler.
Good afternoon, day, wherever you may be. Obviously, neither one of us are Tara Wheeler. Don't have the hair for it, but Tara is out and about right now, and we're wishing her well. So she apparently liked what we did last week. She's going to let us do it again this week. With me again is Stephen Jones, VP of R3 for cybersecurity. And we're going to talk about today just a little bit about penetration testing and what it can mean for small businesses. We'll kind of even help to sort of define penetration testing, because there are a lot of small business focused vendors and tools and whatnot that are out there that tend to maybe overpromise and underdeliver what is actually needed. So we'll talk about that a little bit. As always, if you're tuning in live, drop some questions in the chat. If you're watching this later, I guess leave us a comment and tell us how bad of a job we're doing. So I guess starting off, Jones, have you done much in the way of pen testing yourself?
I actually have not done it myself as a job. I have managed teams of pen testers, and I'm just a huge fan, especially as somebody who works in an MSSP. I really think they're great on a variety of levels. How about yourself? Are you a pen tester?
Not all the way. I've done some pen testy things. We do that as part of our security assessments, where we try to bridge that gap between a vulnerability scan and a full-on internal pen test. And then actually in my previous job, we sometimes had to use offensive security measures to be able to get access to networks, because perhaps the current MSP was withholding creds, or there was the IT person that was, not wanting to lose their kingdom and making it kind of weird for everybody. Those are always tough, but no, I do a lot of scoping for them. We do have some people in the team that have some pen testing skills here, but yeah, not a lot myself. But it's still a good area for us to talk about. I kind of was inspired. I pulled the Authorized Pen Testing Is Not a Crime t-shirt out of the drawer, and I was like, we should talk about pen testing. So I guess Jones, I kind of started off with saying, like, what is a pen test? And so, like, to you, what is a pen test? Like, if you're explaining it to a smaller business.
Sure. Yeah, I explain this quite a lot to smaller businesses. And so the way I explain it is a penetration test is a test of your physical perimeter, your physical security, or your perimeter security. Can't talk today. It is a test of your perimeter security to see how easy it is for a threat actor to actually gain access to things that they are not supposed to have access to. And you actually used a term, it sparked in my head. I hear this all the time, and there's a lot of conflation between kind of what a pen test is and what it isn't. Vulnerability scans are not pen tests, and that's a really important thing to point out. If you pay for a pen test and you get a Qualys report back, you did not get a pen test, and that's a really important thing. There's the concept of scanning for a vulnerability, but a pen test is also taking it a step further, and can we exploit this vulnerability to gain access to something, or is there a misconfiguration? Did we find something like maybe RDP open to the internet, right? And can we exploit that? So that's how I explain it. Is, this is how a hacker sees you, how any hacker in the world would see you from across the internet or outside of your environment. This is what they're doing: is they're looking for ways into the environment and to get access they shouldn't have. So how do you think I did there?
I think you nailed it, especially that difference. I a lot of times I will tell somebody, especially when you consider scope of customer, the office manager of a small medical practice isn't going to want to hear a lot of big words like exploit, vulnerabilities, all those things. I kind of tell them like differences is that a vulnerability scan will tell somebody that your door is probably unlocked. A pen test will tell you for sure because they will actually turn the doorknob. And then a good pen tester is going to, within the scope of their work, will then peek in to see what the impact of opening that door was. Can I go in and steal your car? Whatever. In this case, getting crown jewels of your company. So yeah, that's a kind of a tough discussion. And you said if you get a quality scan, you didn't get a pen test. I've actually seen somebody pay a few $1,000s for a vulnerability scan and get an InMap, and not even a prettied up InMap. Like they just maybe they highlighted. The one I saw, I think they copied it right out of the command line,
Wow.
pasted it in, and then maybe changed like the font so it looked less crummy, and then I think they highlighted some port numbers. Like that was it.
Yeah.
And they didn't even they even had the command that they ran, and it didn't even include like using the vulnerability scripts, because not to bash on InMap, you can do some vulnerability testing with InMap for sure. But it's not something I would use and then tell a client, yep, here's your vulnerability scan. I would use something a little more full featured. InMap with vulnerability scripts might be something that you would use periodically within your own organization. If you don't have the money to, afford a Nessus or Qualys to be running all the time. But yeah, this was tough to see. And
Yeah, and I guess one thing to kind of point out or call out there, James, is that use of InMap during a penetration test is totally legit, but it's really just a small portion, right? It's the reconnaissance phase of the process there to scope out what is available, and that is, it sounds like that firm just didn't go far enough, or they maybe didn't have the capability to go far enough. But yeah, that I would be red hot if I paid a lot of good money for a free InMap scan.
yeah, it was a delicate balance in telling them without sounding like we're trashing,
Sure.
this company, but it's kind of like, hey, they used a tool that cost them nothing, and they turned the tool on and walked away, and then probably just copy and pasted this report. And I'm not even sure if they really even looked at the report or rescanned anything. They just, here it is. And it's tough. But yeah, I think that's the having to educate businesses, whether it's small or big. I mean, if a bigger company doesn't have like an established security team, but they know they need a pen test for whatever reason, often it's driven by compliance or maybe even insurance. Those they come to you and say, well, we need this pen test. They don't totally know what they're truly asking for. I don't know about you, but every time I've had somebody come and say, I need a pen test, the first question I ask is why. Because
Sure. Yeah, that's a great
it's
question.
so, yeah, it's so, because one, when they tell you the reason, you at least then know, okay, that reason's probably valid. So now I get to give them maybe the bad news of what that price range is.
Sure.
And then start to prepare them for what this is going to look like. The big issue also is that you have um, companies that, they want you to test something, but they've never taken any steps to start with. Um, where you say, well, okay, what are we testing? Oh, internal. Okay. Have you done anything yet? And when they say, no, 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 this just like this popped up on this checklist. I'm like, this, I don't care where it was on the checklist. It needs to be probably the last thing you do. Otherwise, you're going to burn a bunch of money. This is going to be a pen test that's going to find such low hanging fruit that we won't even get to like the really critical things that you might not even be able to fix or not be able to fix that easily.
And I really like that you start with that question. What problem are you trying to solve, or what are you trying to accomplish? I think it's really important because a pen test is not a pen test is not a pen test, right? There are flavors of these things, and understanding the context for which they are looking to satisfy a requirement. Is it because of their cybersecurity insurance? Is requiring a penetration test. I'm starting to see this a little bit more frequently now, which I love. Is it because you have a web application that's exposed to the internet and you're trying to secure that? Or do you need an internal pen test, an external, both, all of the above? It's really important to identify the scope because mismanaging the scope can result in the client having a false sense of either security or vulnerability. And so I really appreciate that you start with that question because it would be easy to turn around and just say, yeah, sure, here's a $20,000 pen test, and it doesn't ultimately solve what they need. So so that's wonderful.
Yeah. And when we were kind of talking about the with us where we do that, sort of middle ground, to maybe kind of identify some of those things that won't show up on a vulnerability scan, but definitely will show up on a pen test, but maybe that business isn't ready for that full blown pen test. So things like, your Active Directory passwords, we'll dump those, we'll compare them to like the Have I Been Pwned list, and suddenly we come back and come back to them and say, hey, like these 8 people are sharing credentials and they're in different departments. That's bad. Like that's, and then other things that are out there, those low hanging fruits. I mean, if you know what you're doing and you know how to explain to the customers, and the most important thing is obviously permission. Even like what we do, we do ask, for that explicit permission to do these things, because technically, dumping the database of a company and pulling passwords, that starts getting into a legal area that I don't want to have to deal with. This t-shirt came about because a couple pen testers exceeded a scope, not totally through their fault, but
Yeah.
That's just something that we have to look at.
We have
So
an excellent question in the
yeah,
chat here.
yeah. So Sheila asking here, does an SMB need a full pen test, or would a light pen test be enough? So obviously, if you're talking, what is full versus light, what does that kind of mean to you?
So to me, I would say a light pen test is typically, I think the way we would phrase that is an external pen test. So an external pen test is really looking at, again, what you look like to the world, what your perimeter looks like to any threat actor or hacker that's out there. The more involved pen test is an internal pen test. Now, when you think about what the perimeter of a company looks like, and I know today I'm probably treading on a thin line here because companies look any number of ways today. But traditionally, your perimeter was however many firewalls you physically had separating your office space from the internet. So, if you think about, even an SMB that has maybe 4 or 5 locations, that's typically an external footprint of 4 or 5, maybe 10 IP addresses. And so that is a very small scope when we're talking about doing an external assessment. Now you think about that same SMB, and maybe there are 50 IPs and all kinds of machines and IoT and other gadgets and devices and things like that on the network inside. That becomes a much more complicated assessment. Way more things to touch. A lot more complication in architecture and navigating that. So that I would consider a full internal and external pen test, and so that's how I would draw the line. Do you make any other distinction, James, between kind of that full and light?
No, I think you hit that right there. And a lot of the light pen tests, you see those being asked by insurance and compliance, and there is value in those. But I just from experience in the ones that we've done, once you've kind of gone through the, SSL versions, or, maybe this random setting, on your web server being not quite right, or you're not on the right patch level for your firewall, you're not finding a lot of stuff. Now, companies, if they're, slapping a bunch of IoT devices on their network and then not realizing that those devices are now like actually phoning home and creating open ports, finding cameras is always a great one. And we talked about that last week. Just a quick Shodan scan of a client would, probably come down to the thing of like, hey, before you cut this check for this pen test, do you want to maybe let us, do you want to mitigate this issue? Because this is going to be probably the only real finding that's on here. And I'm going to feel bad about taking your money, because we're going to do that. But the internal ones, yeah, those are the full on, what it would look like if that attacker gains access, and or if you had an insider threat, a bigger company where your IT person does have some knowledge, skills, and abilities to really wreck your company beyond just locking everybody out and walking away or something like that. But that's, yeah. And Tony here, is a great point. You have to draw that line in scope of service. That because sometimes, and it's something that we ask our customers during pen tests, that, hey, if we get in like past your firewall, how far down the rabbit hole do you want us to really go? Can we now try to, hit a server, hit a workstation, something like that? And if they, and some of the companies are like, well, could you do that? I'm like, well, that's what an attacker would do. And if you're trying to simulate attacker behavior, it probably is a good idea to do that. Because also, somebody telling you, hey, this is a problem, there still needs to be that, so what, like, why is this a problem? Well, because I can get in there and I can actually, pull all your data out from the server. Okay, that sounds bad, and and another thing, Tony kind of drawing those lines, and that makes sense, where you do them. The physical pen testing it's kind of a complete different animal. A lot of times that, I said earlier, is, hey, this lock looks crappy. Now let me prove it. And, and then asking the customer, what is your standard? Because I'm not a very good lock picker, but if I can get in inside a minute, is that successful? Probably in my book, it would be. And then you have to ask those things of what do you worry about now? Are you worried about not being able to see somebody standing at the door for a whole minute fumbling with it? So,
yeah, I appreciate Tony dropping physical in here as well. I know this probably is it's an eccentricity of mine. I think physical pen testing is just the coolest. I have heard some amazing stories for physical pen testers, and this is just for the audience in case you're unfamiliar. What we've been talking, James and I and Tony commenting on what we've been talking about so far is actually the hacking or the unauthorized access to the network, right? So we're using technology, we're gaining access to systems and pen testing systems. The physical side is actually pen testing your physical security, locks, cameras, access controls, gaining access to elevators and getting to places inside of a physical building. I just they're so interesting and fascinating to me, and I know I should probably think the other thing is more interesting because it is the majority of my career and day job. But I think the folks who do that stuff have the coolest job in the world.
I agree. That's one area where I have gotten some opportunities to test some customers. I actually, I don't know, did I tell this about last week? But defeated a door sensor, or it's called a request to exit. So as if a door has like a magnetic lock, as you're leaving, it will detect you leaving and it will unlock for you, so you're not having to fight against the magnet. But because there was enough space under the door, I actually slid a cybersecurity awareness poster underneath and got it to pop. And that was kind of a nice little win. And I was able to show the customer what was going on. And also the can of air trick, if you're not familiar with that, but that one's turning a can upside down and spraying spraying it inside, and it triggers the sensor the same way. And shout out to Dave, who I probably learned all this from him, and it's kind of a nice thing to be able to talk about that.
I thought this too, real quick, Deviant. Using the awareness poster is, I think, the insult to injury. I think that was brilliant.
Well, and because and so this was a state agency, and to be very, very clear, I had permission, but I kept asking, I kept kind of wondering about that sensor, and I was like, okay, I don't have a can of air. And I said, and I know I need like a temperature difference and the motion to kind of make it happen. The big part was, I need something probably big enough to like get it under. And I had just gotten this tube from like CISA that had these cybersecurity awareness posters, and I grabbed one and I was like, this thing's massive. I'm like, oh, I bet I could. Yep. And I slid it under, and it popped, and I was like, oh, this is great. And then I went and I showed them, the issue. And there is something, like, as we're talking about the physical side, there is a part where you do have to balance physical security with things like safety for people. Request exit signs and some or sensors rather are oftentimes there to help with ADA compliance, which was when I gave this finding to them, that was kind of their initial pushback was, there's ADA requirements for this kind of stuff. And I said, okay, but you still need a control, and you don't have a control for it right now to prevent it from happening. So that's always a thing that we look at. And yes, the physical pen testing part, it feels more fun because you get to like mess with, like, you feel like you're truly a bad guy. You feel like you are doing something wrong. The network security stuff, that just feels like, okay, I'm just gonna do the same kind of stuff that I normally do. Just I'm gonna get information that I normally wouldn't be able to get to. I mean, so many of the commands that we run are both can both be used for good and for bad reasons. So that's always a fun thing. Now, the one part to any penetration testing that you do is, and a very smart, awesome person that I have the privilege of knowing around here, he's always told us that we pop shells, we pop doors for the accolades, the high fives, but we write the reports to get paid. And the reports are really, really where it's at. And I don't know, Jones, if you've seen some reports that kind of made you question what it was, who wrote this, why it was here. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, being with MSSPs for a very long time, I've worked with a lot of different firms. I've had, I think, the benefit, the privilege to see a lot of these over the years, and it's really a mixed bag. I will tell you that it is a mixed bag on firms that I think do a really, really great job. And then firms that really don't do a great job. But reporting, I think you're right. That is the thing the client takes away, right? I mean, great that you were able to find vulnerabilities, exploit vulnerabilities, gain access to things. If you can't communicate that in a meaningful way, and I think the other piece of the puzzle is it's not just about communicating that you found it or kind of what you found. A really great pen tester is also going to be making recommendations. They're going to be trying to help their client with remediating or closing these things. And, it's not always a very black and white situation of just turn that protocol off or just disconnect that system from the internet. Sometimes it's a more nuanced. We need to have a mitigating control. We need to have maybe a few different things in place to prevent this type of problem. But I think this is probably one of the, just again, in my career, what I've seen, it is clear and concise communication, both verbally and written, is a soft skill that I think more of us should have. And I'm really curious to hear your experience with this as well, to see, do you have similar experiences? Do you see, about a 50-50 toss up and things you think are really good and meaningful, or, what's been your experience with it?
I've seen good, bad. I've seen plagiarized. I won't get into that, but
Okay.
but I have, yeah, that'll be a conversation over like some whiskey and cigars or something one day. But the one issue that I've seen sometimes is that the executive report is thin on details, which is understandable, but then the technical report isn't really retracing any steps. Not kind of, sometimes I feel like the remediation stuff is held back, maybe because they're hoping to now get a contract to do the remediation stuff. And I mean, and that's understandable, but I would much prefer, and how we do them are, we write the finding, we write the remediation, we let them know that, hey, if these remediations are a little too difficult for you, let's talk, and then go from there. But it's it's kind of pointless to give somebody a whole list of problems, no real way of like validating if they even exist. Especially as we're talking a small business, if an MSP is given a pen test report and it says, okay, there's this vulnerability was exploited, that's knock, tech or whatever that's assigned to that client. They don't know, they're trying to keep their heads above water with the regular stuff. And, and if you can't take that extra step of, the fix is to disable DHCP v6 or something like that, if you can't put that down in the paper, then, you're not really writing a report, you're writing a brag sheet, I did this, I popped that, I fished this guy, that stuff. I'm like, great. What are your steps to fixing it? That's what we're paying for the report, but we kind of need a whole report.
Do you, I thought of another question while you were explaining that. How often do you see clients that end up, so they've gone through the pen test, they get the report, and then they end up with kind of the analysis paralysis of what do I do? And tell me, I guess, share how do you help them through that? How do you get them to do something?
Yeah. So kind of I kind of split it in two different directions. One, the stuff that's really, really bad. So, this is a weaponized exploit that, a 6-year-old with a Chromebook could do. Okay, we need to probably address that really, really quick.
Mhm.
And then on the other side are those really quick wins. The stuff where you can maybe hand that off, especially if you have the remediations in there fairly well spelled out. um, you can say, hey, I know you only been working here for like 2 months, but we're going to need you to take this list and work on the low hanging fruit. And some of that's going to be, turning off the service or things like that. And now, once you start turning things off, you obviously in a business you have to balance, like, am I going to break something? Am I going to find out that Bob in marketing absolutely needs this to be turned on? But so there is a balance. But yeah, I think you know the impact, the urgency of the finding, and then those low hanging fruits are kind of where we get, and then somewhere you meet in the middle where now you're just slogging through a medium that is because of a TLS mismatch or something weird like that, and you're not you've taken care of probably the important stuff. And then at that point, then you kind of just look at it and say, all right, can we fix these things? Are they acceptable risks? Whatever the case may be. But yeah, I think that's been my approach. How we advise clients, if we're not going to jump into the remediation side, we just tell them, like, hey, you got some things that you could probably accomplish today. You got some things that you can accomplish within a week. You just need to, like, there's gonna be a couple things going to require a reboot. I know nobody likes to reboot, but please reboot. Reboot your server. Your server will like you for that. Will thank you for that. And then the other side is, yeah, there's those really, really bad things that are out there. Yeah, and that's a great point, Nico. Is if your company's big enough that you do have a dev team, an admin team, taking a look at the list of findings, and then, yeah, kind of divvying them out, like, hey, this is a dev problem, or it's a dev problem to start with, and then it circles back to the admins. And that's kind of also a thing of, like, that analysis through paralysis. You're like, well, I took this report, this well formatted report, probably in a PDF, probably even password protected, and now I've dumped all this into an Excel. And now I need to take that Excel and I need to make an Excel for the developers, an Excel for the admin team, an Excel
Oh,
for HR because there's policy stuff. And now suddenly you have created so much paperwork, so much stuff. And I mean, sure, you could say, well, we could throw this all in as Jira tickets. Wow, I almost threw up in my mouth saying that, but but there's companies out there that they'll sit on that. And we've even doing our kind of middle of the ground network compromise assessment, we'll do a retest 6
Sure,
months
yeah.
later, and I'll find things that were those low hanging fruit, and it's like, this, like they're, some of them are almost bad enough where it's like, look, just kick me in an hour of my time and I'll just fix it for you right now, because this is actually making my eye twitch to find this a second time, and
Sure,
having explained how bad.
sure.
Um, so what about you with mitigating and the craziness there?
Yeah, as an MSP, MSSP, again, my role is often to help clean it up, and sometimes it can be an issue with with something we're doing or not doing. But a lot of times it just comes down to, as a service provider, they are looking at us to help them actually get things fixed. So it comes down to prioritizing. I prioritize by criticality. The things that are accessible from the internet, those are probably the first things we're going after, because that's the first door to close, right? It's, at the end of the night when you go to bed, you close your front door and you lock it. And those are the things we want to make sure we're doing. And then, working through the rest of those things, I just saw the comment pop up about retesting. 100%, you got to retest. Make sure that you can track progress. That is a huge motivator to retest and find out that 50% of your findings were closed, or depending on how long it's been, hey, maybe even 100% of them are closed. That's always great to see. I rarely see that. I'll tell you that. I rarely see the 100% closed. But the one comment there, the other question I wanted to ask you, James, I spend a lot of time telling clients and folks that they need to do these things. For the first part of my career, I feel like pen tests were, and I guess maybe I should qualify that. I've been in this space for like 15 years. For the first part of my career, I felt like pen tests were almost seen as a luxury item. It wasn't the kind of the bread and butter stuff. It was, a specialized thing. A lot of providers don't offer it and don't do it from a managed service perspective. And so I feel like it was a luxury item. And I have spent so much time standing on my soapbox, trying to communicate to everybody that will listen that it is no longer a luxury. It is it's table stakes for having any modern business that is connected to the internet and is using information systems.
Yeah.
And the way that I kind of humorously, try to convince them is that a pen test is a chance for us, for a firm that you know and trust, to kick the tires on your security program before the Russians and the Chinese are kicking the tires on your security program, right? I mean, that's not where you want to be, is finding out that you have some horrific vulnerability because, surprise, all your stuff is now in Cyrillic. That is not where you want to be. So I'm curious if you're seeing more adoption of this. I hope so. I really want more people to be moving in this direction. And I'm happy to see that places like, things like cybersecurity insurance is in some cases requiring it. Some providers do require at least an annual pen test, at least an annual external pen test. Let me be very clear. Very few people require an internal penetration test, but you at least have to, in most cases, get an annual external. So what are you seeing amongst, folks that you're working with? Is it being adopted more? Are you still seeing people treating it like a luxury?
We're definitely seeing a little more adoption. And people asking, and oftentimes, like we talked about before, is like, okay, why do you need this pen test? Okay, yep. Now on to the next question. And, and some companies, maybe they see the price and they kind of balk at it, but it's just like any other security measure. It's explaining to them that, hey, this is, this money that you're putting down for this is potentially, 100x less than if the attacker actually goes and, runs a pen test for you, an unauthorized pen test. That is a crime. So that's a piece there that we really, explain to them. And also, it's kind of an interesting thing, like, pretty much every company that you work with now, they want, they want phishing done. And it's like, great, like how do you want it done? Oh, you want me to see if they open an attachment. Cool. Okay, they open the attachment. Now what? What do you have in place that would stop that? Because even the big companies that talk about, that run security awareness, they'll tell you that, your baseline is probably 40% of the people are going to click or do what they shouldn't do. And even with 6 or 12 months of training, you're maybe getting that down to 10%.
Right.
And if you are not testing what happens after that file downloads, then you really don't know what you are getting yourselves into. So, ask a pen testing company to say, hey, this is what we want to do. And I would say most pen testing firms are flexible enough in scope that they might just do that as the test, to find out what's wrong. And that's something we haven't even really talked about it, because it's more of that red team, blue team, purple team stuff. But a penetration test also helps to validate the tools that you do have. Pen testers, they don't necessarily mind if they get caught, because that means that you're doing something right. They're not all out there to just be like, oh, I owned you. You had no idea I was there. They are kind of hoping like, hey, after the end of this, what came about. And have you guys done anything like that where a customer of yours is getting tested and then you guys are like, hey, we're gonna kind of jump into this and sort of get some training out of it, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, absolutely. The way I treat these, again, as a service provider, I'm often also doing monitoring for a client that we are providing a pen test to, or that I work with third-party firms. R3 does not actually do pen testing out of our own ranks today, but we partner with firms that we bring in to do this. So it does put me in the interesting position of, I am monitoring this environment. Can I see it? Does my team see it? And there's kind of I always have mixed feelings on this. Obviously, as a almost career blue teamer, I want to catch it. I want to see it. I want to be able to tell my client I saw it. I want to be able to report, the suspicious alerts and things like that, because that's what we're really hired to do. On the flip side, pen testers are, fantastically smart and capable people, and their entire job is to do their job without me seeing them. And so there's a lot that we learn going through these things, where when we do the after action report, when we're sitting down with the client and the pen testing firm after the fact, and they say, hey, we made a bunch of noise over here in this system and you guys didn't report it. And we're able to go maybe find a system that isn't being monitored. We're able to find a configuration that maybe wasn't generating audit logs in the way that it should be. So I always take it as a learning opportunity. I think there's obviously a lot of opportunity to get a bruised ego here. But at the end of the day, we're providing a defensive service for a client, and it's about learning. And getting the download on those reports and talking to the pen testers to understand. I tend to think like a defender. You have people like Dave that think like an attacker, and our brains don't always think of the same problem in the same way. So wherever you can learn from folks like that, it helps me, from a defensive perspective. And then the attackers also study how we think, because again, they need to do their job without us seeing them. So I always love the challenge, and I try to learn from it and try to keep my ego out of it, because this is really for the client's benefit, and it doesn't do me any good to blow up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've gotten to write almost like an incident report, kind of, from the standpoint of, okay, these are all the things that we saw, and doing that before we've gotten the report from the pen testers. And then it's kind of nice to be like, oh, they did that and we didn't catch it. Okay, well, new detection or new countermeasure, something to try to stop it. And I like this here. We're getting close to the end here. Nico saying, the maturity model, and yeah, like first step should always be asset inventory. Know what the heck you have, because you can't protect it. if you don't know about it, and you can't get it tested if you don't tell them, like, hey, this is something that's there. If you want it in scope, you probably need to know about it yourself. So yeah, as we're kind of wrapping this up here, I wanted to also say, if you're looking to do a penetration test and you are talking to a company, one of the things that I will tell you to ask for, if they can provide it, is a sample report. They can redact the names of the companies, redact if you ask for that and you get some pushback, I would kind of take that as a red flag. I don't know about you, Jones.
Yeah.
I, that's something that, we have a, kind of it's been redacted properly, but it was a real report at one point, and we just hand it off and say, here you go. That's something that a good penetration testing company or a good security company in general is going to be able to provide that to you pretty much as you are going through all the things. So as we're wrapping this up, I wanted to ask you, what is the most important skill in security, in your opinion?
Ooh, wow, that's a great question. I was not at all prepared for. Most important skill in security is, I think it is. I don't know if this. I guess this is technically not a skill. Is a trait okay? If a trait is okay, humility. Because I think a lot of us, especially spending a lot of time. I'm going to steal Nico's learning fast. Yeah, no, wanting to learn, curiosity, those things, all real. Humility, again, ego, clouds judgment. But yeah, learning. I tell people all the time, our field is a ton of reading. If you don't like reading, security is probably not a place to be. But yeah, reading is huge. I read probably all day. It's not books necessarily, but I read all day long. And so being able to read and teach yourself and learn quickly and having that innate curiosity, all of those things, I think. So that's probably 17 answers to your one question, but yeah.
Yeah. And I being able to learn fast, curiosity, definitely, like, those are definitely things that, and humility. Yes, absolutely. For me, and it's the one that I lean on the hardest. And yeah, and Tony kind of actually says it here. I tell everybody that I mentor, it's the communication side. We talked about, the reports are what get us paid, both red team and blue team. You stop an incident in your organization, and it doesn't really get out to anybody that you stopped it. They have no idea until you write the incident report. You put in the details of the ticket. Yeah, proper communications, writing to your audience, that's huge. I would challenge I'm willing to be challenged on the statement that is the most important thing. Because if you're not strong at writing, if you don't like to write, this is not there might be areas of security where not wanting to write or communicate, you can get by at, but not in most of the mainstream roles. And if you are out there studying any element of cybersecurity, information security, and you haven't started a blog where you're talking about what you're learning and applying it, on paper a little bit, start now. Because I know for myself, that's something I'm always curious about when I'm looking to hire somebody or whatever. And I know a lot of other firms are the same way.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I will follow that up with one anecdote of an example where where communication is not great. And it's actually, I've noticed this a lot with incident response firms, where the folks that are working in incident response have really terrible communication skills. And you're dealing with a company that is going through the worst day of their life. And somebody says, well, this is like, I don't know who did this, but this is pretty dumb, right? On a call with a client. And, those are the things that make me cringe. And so I will 100% retract everything I said. Communication, definitely key. I think I brought this up earlier, even in this, in our webcast here, that it's a soft skill that I think is really missing from a lot of our industry. And I like to focus on it and coach my teams where possible, how to communicate effectively. And to your point, you can do the coolest thing in the world, but if you can't tell anybody about it effectively, did you do it? Did it matter?
Exactly. If a server falls and nobody wrote about it, did it really happen? Well, as always, Jones, awesome to do this. We thank you all who have joined. We thank those of you in the future who will watch this one day. So from all of us here at the Red Queen, and we are encouraging you to have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye, guys.